proposal for a consultant to write that? Will it be the same people that are doing this, or?
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the study session of the October 18th, 2023 Planning Commission of North Augusta. I want to officially call to order the Planning Commission meeting study session at 6:02 p.m. The agenda we have is to discuss two items. First is a review of the comments from the draft of the North Augusta Development Code's public hearing, and then we'll follow that up with a review of the impact fee resolution study. And we need to call roll or do anything officially for the study session?
Not for the study session, no, sir.
All right. Then, again, at this point, again, we've been provided a document with additional comments and reviews from the ongoing development code review. And can I hand that off to you, Tommy,
Sure.
to lead the conversation from here?
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. You have a memorandum dated number 23-032. The first part of that comes from well, the first is a recommended staff change. And remember that Section 6-29760 of South Carolina Code of Laws says that whenever you sent your recommendation to City Council, if they want to make any changes in what you sent to them, they have to send it back to you and get a recommendation of it before they can pass it. So that's what we're here tonight to do. Now, the first one is a recommended staff change. When we were originally doing it, we have variances and waivers. In the current code, we have a section that lists what chapters are waivers, what chapters are variances. Well, when we did the new code, we moved waivers from the Planning Commission to the BZA, but we didn't say what chapters were waivers and what chapters were variances. And that's what this first recommended change by staff is for. The consultant went back through the existing code and determined the best, what chapters fit, so that's what are waivers now would be waivers, and what would be variances now would still be variances. So that should be neutral in any change, but that is a very important paragraph for us to include in there. So hopefully y'all will recommend approving that in there. Then we can go to the council study session on August the 14th. They met, and they had several questions and concerns. And one of them was in number 1 is 3.4.2.2, talks about reconstruction of non-conforming buildings, but doesn't place a trigger on what amount triggers that. When can it be replaced? When can it not? It was kind of just out there. So this is staff's recommendation below that, with the underline being added in and the strike-throughs deleted. And I'll stop there to see if y'all have any questions for me.
Do we need to approve these one at a time, Tommy, or as a group?
No, well, one is this is the work session. So we're just discussing. And then in the main meeting, the regular meeting, I think you could do it at a blanket, but if you want to change something, approve it, but with this change like this, and I think that's the simpler way to do it. Knowing that next month the written code will come back to you for you actually to send to council. Any questions on this? Okay. So then we go over, and something that I picked up in doing this was recommending adding number 3. And what that does is lets you add on to a non-conforming building as long as you're not increasing the non-conformity. Say you're non-conforming because you're too close to a property line, but you could add on to the other side of it and meet all your setbacks, meet all your restrictions. That would allow you to do that. And the current code right now, the way it was written, I don't know that you could do that. Any questions or anything?
That would be for uses too, right?
This is a non-conforming building or structure. We're just talking about the building. The use, I'd have to look at the section there, but I think it would follow along the same lines. I think there's some in there that would allow that, but and then we get to number 2. Basically, on the residential R14, that's almost an R14, 14,000 square feet is almost 1/3 of an acre. So at the header, they wanted to add 1/3 of an acre. Pawn shops. Since this is a work session, I think we'll
Get comfortable.
there was a lot of discussions about pawn shops downtown, where they should be allowed, should they not be allowed, is a conditional use downtown, could you even meet the conditions downtown for a pawn shop? So I think it might just be clean to take that use out of in the downtown on Georgia Avenue having a pawn shop there. Now we get into an area that, to be honest with you, I steered y'all away from. Felt like it was a fairly new ordinance, and while I changed it, it was working. But there were some recommendations, and council liked it. So what I did was they wanted to allow food trucks on the HOA property. Can't be on the streets, can't be set up at somebody's house, but like on HOA property, as a conditional use type thing. So what I did was I have gone through the food trucks section of the zoning ordinance and did strike-throughs and underlines of what needed to be changed to make that work. It sounds real simple. We're going to let you do this, but you see all the different strikes and underlines it created. But I wanted to make sure that we got what council wanted to do there. Commercially zoned went away. Parcels, trucks would be permitted on commercially or industrial zoned parcels and in residentially zoned areas if located in the common areas with the property owner's permission. And then change the next section. Shall be parked a minimum of 50 feet from any residential zoning district. Well, that's hard to do when you're in a residential zoning district, except where the food truck is operating on a common area of a residential district. And y'all may have some better wording here. Please let me know if you do. The hours of operations said in commercially and industrially zoned properties. That was a strike through. So that in the residential areas, they would have the same times as if they were in a commercial area. If anything, it would probably need to be more restrictive there rather than less. Basically, the next one, it says they're only permitted in commercially and industrial zoned areas. That's stricken, and that would be pretty much it. Any issues with that? Discussions?
I like it.
Yeah, I think it's a good addition.
I think your wording is good.
Okay. So the next one was about black vinyl clad chain link. There was some concern about black vinyl. And I think the biggest concern, or my biggest concern, if it's what the city wants to require, that's fine. That's what we're going to do. But I think about the homeowner that goes out, puts up hires a fence company. They come in and put a cyclone fence around his backyard, or he puts one. He goes down to Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, orders the fencing, and puts it in himself. And then we've got a problem for something that a lot of people wouldn't think about. But for any case, council, when they were discussing it, talked like they wanted to just allow chain link and not make it black vinyl clad. Now, there was a lot of discussion on that here. And we take back whatever recommendation y'all want to make. I was talking with somebody, and they did make a point that you could require black vinyl in commercial uses and resident, and allow and not be a requirement in residential. that's kind of y'all's call to make.
Does anybody know what kind of price difference black vinyl coated fence versus regular chain link fence is?
I really don't know. I've never priced it. I'm the homeowner that goes out and gets the regular chain link.
Wouldn't there be some governance, I guess, depending on where the house is located? I mean, if your homeowners association or your homeowners for the neighborhood or something like that could restrict it as well.
Correct. Yeah,
So-
but we don't get into that.
That's right. So we're just talking, okay.
Yeah. Now, if
Now, I guess that's added protection in certain neighborhoods that didn't want to see it.
Right.
There's those associations that would require you to do something else.
we,
Either
we
wood,
could
shadow box.
allow it, if their HOA said no, we don't allow chain link fencing in the neighborhood, they still can't have chain link fencing, even if it is black vinyl clad.
I'm fine with the galvanized and a residential one. Commercial, I think I'd like to see the black vinyl. You don't see a lot of chain link fencing fencing around it, on at Lowe's or something, is a lot nicer. Black vinyl and then limited requirement for galvanized barbed wire fence. Galvanized fence in somebody's backyard, I mean, that's.
I agree.
All right, let me ask you this. How about detention ponds for residential subdivisions?
Coated.
Also governed by the HOA, if the HOA allows it, is it different for personal homes versus HOA detention ponds? Is that not subject to the HOA guidelines?
It is subject to the HOA, but remember, that's separate. We're talking about what the city requires. I mean, does the city want to require black vinyl clad there, or is galvanized okay? And that's just, when we say residential districts, I can see that question coming up. Okay, Tommy, this is a residential district because it's a neighborhood. I can put galvanized. Y'all come back and say, wait a minute, Tommy, I thought that was supposed to be black vinyl clad. I just want to make sure, I get my marching orders of what you want.
You seem to be the chain link. Common development fence is black vinyl. If you like around a playground, it would be black vinyl in a residential district. Maybe private homeowner, private lots.
Private dwelling lots, right? So, what I'm hearing from y'all is on the individual lots, residential lots, they could be galvanized. On commercial and common areas and amenities, in residential areas, you want black vinyl clad.
Yes.
And of course, this is a work session. We'll go back through this during the regular meeting, and that's when we'll take the vote. Number 6, there was a lot of discussion about this. One is section 6.5, downtown mixed use 1. Actually, downtown mixed use 2 has architectural requirements. And there were some that wanted the planning director to have the authority to accept alternative materials if he felt that it met the intent. I talked with our consultant about that, and I agreed with our consultant that we really shouldn't go there. That would take the transparency out of it. That would, a waiver like that should be in the open. It should be transparent, and it should be decided on by a body such as y'all. Not a bureaucrat sitting in an office with his personal, So, this is the wording to be included that our consultant came up with. If somebody had a great plan for downtown, basically they could ask for a waiver from the Planning Commission. Everything else is going to the BZA, but here, the Planning Commission is looking forward, and it's about design elements. So in talking through it with our consultant, we both kind of felt like the Planning Commission with the forward vision looking would be better suited to make a decision on this particular aesthetic issue than the BZA. And that's why it comes to the Planning Commission. Good, bad?
Sounds good to me.
Makes
I
sense.
like it.
Yeah.
All right, then on September the 11th, yes, we had a public hearing on September the 11th. The Builders Association had several comments that they provided to us. You'll see them in the black. Staff's comments are in the blue. And I kind of go through those with you. On the first one, 4.12, 4.12. Our comments there. I'll let you give you a minute to kind of take a look at it. To allow a 20% reduction in lot area, if the developer builder basically puts that area over into common space. So there's a net. It's more or less neutral. And otherwise meeting everything else. It'd just be for the lot area. And it allows the developer flexibility in lot layout. It could reduce the infrastructure cost, and the city owns that infrastructure afterwards that we have to maintain. And the ability to decrease lot area works well with infill development and could help preserve additional buffers and green space within the development. Staff's comment on that would be, one, it's going to be hard for us to track. Where, as far as building permits and development. The other thing is there's a recommendation also, and we have discussed that some, is maybe developing a planned residential development, much like a mixed use, where you could do this kind of thing. And our recommendation would be to wait, do a planned residential zoning district, and do it right, like what we would feel like is doing the right way, and looking at the totality of how this planned residential area would be working. I think it's both of them is trying to get to the same place. And I'll give y'all a minute to ask questions or discuss.
Yeah, I think it's I like the idea. I like the 20% reduction. I think it's a cool concept. I'm like you. I think it's hard to track. I was leaning towards a similar option of if there was a way we could incorporate that into like a sketch plan review, if a developer did want to do it that way, because I think it works. I would approve something like that coming through, but just putting it in the code as a blanket, I feel like would be tough for y'all. I agree. I like the idea.
It's a neat idea.
I agree. It's a neat idea as long as it's carried throughout the entire development.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, police, yeah, that's,
And I had not thought about that, Mr. Carter, but could be another issue. You have one phase where they do this, the next phase they may not.
well, based on if you change it, you could have one house that's like this and one
Yep.
house is not. I mean, and the continuity there would be an issue, I guess, in some ways. But maybe some people would call that personalizing something, I don't know. But,
Anything else before we move on? 412.3, in the R7 zoning district. Consider allowing townhome and single-family attached a minimum 20-foot lot width, or as an alternate, consider 50% of those townhome, single-family attached lots to be reduced to 20 feet in width, and the remaining 50% must be 24 feet or wider. Staff's comments there is, the Planning Commission discussed that in great detail and came up, and the Planning Commission said 24 feet. So staff is not going to recommend changing what y'all decided. On the other side of that, just notice that the parking pads in the front are 9 by 18. So if it's 20 feet wide, that gives you a foot of grass or 2 feet of grass in the front yard. If you have two car parking, two parking spaces in front. So that is some of the unintended consequences of making them narrower. That's, like I said, the 24 feet is a number that the Planning Commission came up with, so.
What's the current code?
The current code doesn't have a minimum width. In the R7, it's 40 feet. And they have to come in and get a variance every time. And that's, in the new code, we're trying to get around that.
The variance currently is, that's granted, what's the minimum, or what are most developers coming in with?
We're getting anything from 16 feet to 24 to 28.
How are the 16-foot width driveways handled?
We have one, and I pulled up the developer's website and looked at it, and basically in front of the townhomes is a concrete slab.
Concrete pad.
This is a work session. If y'all want to think about it, we can move on, or whatever y'all want to do.
So, just so I'm understanding, the main difference would be whether we have a 2-foot section of grass or a 4-foot section of grass. Or I guess it would be 8 feet if it's 24 and 24.
Well, it comes back to density. It comes back to, the size of the home, how wide that lot is going to be. The parking is just one aspect that kind of jumps out at you. Then you go, they want to put a storage shed in the backyard. Well, You gotta be 5 feet off this property line, you got to be 5 feet off this property line. You've got 20 feet, so that's already 10 feet taken. Yeah. There are those kind of issues too.
Soon get some resolution on this now versus next session.
I'm kind of fine with leaving it at 24.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, I think we discussed it a good bit. I remember talking about it for a good while, and I don't have enough compelling argument to.
20s could still be achieved through a variance, the same process we have now, if that was the product they wanted.
That'd be correct.
I like it.
Okay, good.
Okay, this next one has been pretty controversial, to say the least. There's been a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion in the steering committee. There was a lot of discussion here, a lot of discussion at the public hearing, and now we're back here. Plant material specifications, keep allowances. Their recommendation is to keep allowances for large trees to be 2-inch minimum caliper, and small trees 1-inch minimum caliper. Keep the current minimum height the same as well. Don't change it. Increasing from 3 inches from 2 inches will add about 200 to 300 per tree for large trees and 150 to 200 per tree for small. A typical lot requires 1 street or subdivision tree, 3 large landscape trees, and 2 small. Total increase would be about $1,400. This is builder's cost. Then you add in profit to that, and that's more that the buyer has to pay and pays over the life of the mortgage. The larger tree, when it is planted, the longer it takes to adjust and start growing. A 2-inch tree will generally be the same size as a 3-inch tree in 3 to 4 years and has a higher survivability rate. Nothing stops the developer or builder from upsizing the trees to a larger size if they or the buyer wants the larger tree. However, buyers rarely request larger trees or more trees. They typically prefer to spend their money on upgrades inside the house. And from staff's comments, the issue was thoroughly discussed in both the steering committee and planning commission. Both bodies recommended increasing the size. Roy Kibler, the city horticulturist, has recommended the following comments on the question. The reason for moving to a 3-inch caliper tree is to have a clear trunk for 5 feet so there is no sidewalk interference. Street trees with lower limbs are protruding onto the sidewalk and make it difficult to walk on the sidewalk without hitting tree branches. Tree specifications such as this require the tree to stay another year or so at the nursery to allow it to have a 3-inch caliper and have a good quality structural tree canopy with a clear tree trunk. With the 2-inch caliper trees that are currently being planted, they have not been growing in caliper size very rapidly as there is no tree maintenance taking place by the developer, builder, or landscape installer during the maintenance period. A 3-inch caliper tree in the 3 to 4 years planted correctly could reach a caliper of 5 to 7 inches with proper care. One other option would be require the planting strip to be 10 feet, planting strip which was originally requested for the street trees. And then a 2-inch caliper tree could remain as the tree branches would not interfere with the sidewalks. With the maintenance guarantee of 2 years, the trees are not maintained by the developer and such that the poor quality trees that are being planted are causing problems with the sidewalks and homeowners using them. It appears as the developers are ultimately responsible for the street trees, yet they're passing the cost of the street trees on to the builder, who then passes it on to the homeowner. My professional recommendation would be to plant all street trees up front so there is a tree quality consistency, and the developer bears the cost of street trees and therefore would have an interest in caring for the trees during the maintenance guarantee. And those are from the city horticulturist, his comments. It comes back down to 2 inches or 3 inches.
I think again, I don't really see enough to change what we came, the conclusion we came to begin with. I think it's something you could argue both sides for days.
Agreed.
I don't disagree with you. I think it's been argued for days, both sides.
If we only had a mass grading policy, might do away with
Yes,
it
sir.
altogether. But we don't.
I get the impression from y'all, leave it as is.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is preparation of the landscape plan. Also allow the civil engineer to prepare the landscape plan. This is common practice. Roy's comments on that was this issue, and this issue was also discussed during the steering committee and planning commission, which provided the recommendation in the draft. According to the horticulturist, the civil engineer is not a landscape architect, and many times are suggesting trees in the wrong location. I will say that this has probably not been thoroughly enforced as stringent, but if this goes through, the way the verbiage is in the revised code, you know, we would move forward with enforcing that.
What is Roy's comment? They're putting in the wrong place. If they're the wrong species for the wrong spot, 'cause, I mean, the wrong place will be picked up there. I don't have a problem. I mean, I'm a landscape architect. I don't have a problem with the civil engineer. I mean, it's with the plant species that are provided by the city as well as.
We have a tree. We have approved trees and plants. And some of the trees and plants are used in locations where Roy would use other types of trees because he doesn't think these particular trees are appropriate. But if they're on the list, they're allowed by the ordinance. And there's a certain argument that, you know, if the civil engineer is pulling from that list,
Put them wherever they want.
yeah.
So if it's not said that the civil engineer can prepare the landscape plan, then who's it up to?
Excuse me?
So if it's not put in that the civil engineer is able to do the landscape plan, then who does it fall onto to come up with that?
Landscape architect.
Okay, so they would just be required to hire somebody like that to do it.
Yeah, landscape architect.
Certified horticulture.
Yeah. Thank you. I forgot my book.
Just those two.
Opinions?
I don't necessarily see a problem with allowing that. I mean, if there's a list of trees that are going to be at least, you know, ones that aren't going to die in a couple of weeks in the weather, I'm fine with that personally.
Yeah, I guess I'm all right with the addition as well.
Okay, so y'all would recommend changing?
Yes, to allow the civil engineer to prepare a landscape plan.
All right, street trees. Trees, and more trees. Now hang with me, because I'm going to take y'all out in left field on this one.
All right.
All right, from the builders, 7.6.2 mentions subdivision trees, but there's no further allowance for subdivision trees. Keep the allowance for subdivision trees or simply by delete street and subdivision, the language to require one large tree per 40 feet of frontage to be planted between the front of the house and the street. Allow the requirement of planting of the trees in the paragraph above be a requirement for the CO of the house, not the developer final plat, and not a performance or maintenance guarantee, warranty period, or letter of credit. We do not typically include the landscaping in the homeowner warranty because it is up to them to run the irrigation properly and keep the plants alive. Removing the trees from city responsibility and city ownership lowers city liability and expenses. And I talked with each of the city council members about this because one of the things before we came forward with a recommendation from staff, there was a bigger policy issue there in my mind is, do you want street trees or do you not want street trees? And and out of those conversations, the recommendation that you're going to get from staff on this is do away with street trees, do away with subdivision trees. They disappear. In addition to, right now, each lot has required landscaping. In addition to that required landscaping, there be a tree, whether it be 3-inch or 2-inch, whatever comes out of the final ordinance, placed within 10 feet of the front property line. And by doing that, and then that tree will belong to the homeowner. That homeowner, the tree will have to be there before the CO is issued. We do a landscape inspection on every home, believe it or not. So that will be one thing that we look for. Now, the homeowner moves in, he could cut it down the next day. Most people aren't. Most people's probably going to leave that tree. It also gives the developer, if he's building me a house, I can place that tree. You know, I might not want it right in front of my window that I'm looking out. I might want it to the side. So, whereas the street trees every 40 feet, you know, it might be there. So that's the thought process and what we would recommend. How we do that with single family attached, don't know yet. I'm talking to our consultant on that. But we'll have something. If we move in that direction, I'll have it back to you by next time around. This may, where you're building putting trees every 40 feet. Well, if the lot is less than 40 feet wide, it may be more trees. If the lot's wider than 40 feet, it'd be less trees. So there's an incentive there, albeit not much, for wider lots. But anyway, then from the other end, the builder is not in the performance guarantee for his letter of credit for the final plat, and there's not a maintenance letter of credit either, maintenance guarantee for those trees like they're on street trees. And then the city doesn't pay the recurring cost of maintenance and upkeep, and also does not have the liability.
I like all of what you just said.
Like I said, I threw you a curveball.
I like it. I think there needs to be something about, making sure we keep trees, especially in these new neighborhoods going up. You see them some places sometimes, like, all trees are all gone, and that's not a good not a good look, not good for the planet or whatever. I'm not Mr. Tree Hugger guy, but I do love the outdoors, so I can understand the need for something. But it was pretty strict, I feel. I like what you just said, what you just described, feels nice to me. Now, I bought a 120-year-old house, so I didn't have to deal with new trees and all that. And also, like, the whole guarantee or whatever on the tree, like they said, it's kind of up to the homeowner to water them and to take care of them, so I don't necessarily see why, you know, when you buy a place, that's yours now, you take care of it. So I can understand not doing that. So I like what you just said. Obviously, once you kind of go over it and have it in the right words,
Right.
we can revisit that. But I like that idea.
Just
Go
in
ahead.
residential or in commercial districts too?
I've been focused on residential.
Because, I mean, I like street trees. I like them in commercial district and I like them in neighborhoods. I think the newer neighborhoods that are lined with street trees are a lot more pleasant than they would be without them.
So you would look at keeping it as is.
Which I mean, there's a lot of trees required by North Augusta code, but I don't think it's a bad thing.
No.
Compared to a Hilton Head or a Charleston code, we don't require hardly anything. I kind of like it seems like a lot, but it's really not compared to other municipalities.
Lynn?
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, altering opinions, I guess. Huh? Yeah, I think what we've seen with the street trees is the fact of how they intrude on the sidewalks and different things like that that require the city to have more maintenance and things like that. So I think if we decide to do that or leave it the same, I think there's, I don't have my words right, but I like the concept of putting it in the front yard. I don't know that the owner would keep it or not. That bothers me that they could cut it down the next day. It really does. I like trees as well. But I do see trees that, be it a subdivision, be it a commercial site where you've got a 2-inch tree in a hole that's surrounded by red clay. How long is that tree gonna last? And so are they doing it just because there's an ordinance there? Are they doing it to maintain, you know, they're just following the rules. So, I mean, is it worth, I guess, is it of the opinion that we do that just so we follow the rules, knowing that tree may die the next day? But of course, I'm kind of in limbo. I'm not,
There is some of that. My recommendation, if you remain with street trees, I would recommend putting something in the ordinance that the city horticulturists take over the maintenance responsibilities of them at the time we take over the street and other utilities in the subdivision. I don't understand. My thing is, and my thought process there is, we take the street right away, we take the water, we take the sewer, we take the stormwater. But yet the trees, and we have maintenance guarantees on all of these. But the trees, we say, oh, we have a maintenance guarantee. We can't touch those for 2 years. Well, we work on the storm. We work on the others in those 2 years. And the trees are now on our property. So to me, the city should take over that at the time that it's dedicated. Because they look back at the developers for 2 years, well, the developers are gone. Some developers stay in the community, some don't. But you know, we don't call the developer to unblock a sewer line. So why should we call a developer to water the trees or fertilize the trees or the normal maintenance? Now, if the tree dies, yeah, we could go against that guarantee and change it out. But anyway, that's just another area, another way of looking at it if you want to keep the street trees. And that's why we put the trees to the back, because they're always the most controversial.
Well, I'll say, from what I've heard, back in the day when they first started developing North Augusta, they planted all these, I've heard them called Carolina berry, and they're all along both sides of my property and our shop, and they're everywhere. And every year when they bloom, the birds eat them. They make a mess all over my cars, my driveway, my sidewalks. When they fall, they make a mess. So assuming they didn't have this much discussion about them and how much I hate those trees, I'm okay with having some discussion because I can see how important this can be for a long time. Because unless you're planting a brand new smaller tree again, you're stuck with that. Those trees are hard to get rid of too.
And remember, the difference between street trees and putting them with the private property owner. And the reason I say they can cut them down is I really don't want the city going on a single-family residential property and telling the homeowner he has to replace a tree. You know, that just, in my book, that just feels like overreach.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is if it's in his yard, is his. If it's a street tree, that's city property. So it goes in and the city maintains it, and, you know, the property owner that's on the other side of the sidewalk can't cut it down. He or limit up or move it, you know, that type of thing.
That's that gray area where the homeowner can't do that, but he's expected to cut the grass on that side of the sidewalk, though.
Yep. Yes, sir. All right. Y'all want to move on and come back to it during the meeting?
Well,
Or-
that's anything good.
I haven't grasped a good answer yet, so.
Not sure we have a consensus or.
Okay.
I don't know that. Seems like the idea of the city taking over street trees would be a hefty budget item to add to the city that we probably need their input on.
I think it's $207 a year per tree. Is for labor and maintenance.
A hefty
Is-
item to
is-
put on the
is-
city's budget.
Is what I asked Roy, and that's the number he gave back to me.
Obviously I agreed, like I said from the beginning, kind of what you said. And maybe you guys can kind of talk some about however we end up writing, or you end up writing, kind of what you said about it being on the property owners, and it could be adjusted some in the verbiage to satisfy kind of what fits good with you. But I definitely I like what you said to begin with.
I like to see it drafted up.
Yeah.
So should we move forward with drafting it up that way?
Yes.
We can do that. I still go back to the commercial versus residential district on that too, though. Is there a way to split that? Or
Yeah, and
do we need to
when
split that?
when I'm thinking about it as we're going through, I'm definitely picturing residential.
Residential.
So commercial, if commercial had different something, I'd be okay with that.
I'm sorry. Most of your commercial, when I think about commercial development, usually you don't have as many street trees.
Any frontage on that, you're required to put them, right?
But they're not street trees. They're that front landscaping strip that's on the private property. But we'll drill into that a little bit more. But I think, you know, yeah, because that has to be on their property. So there's that front planting strip there that's required. And that's different than street trees. All right. Y'all didn't know y'all had so much going on tonight.
Well, I've been reading through it.
Excuse me. Protection and increase the buffer width. From the builders, it says the proposed code will now require 50-foot.
They skipped one.
Article 9, subdivision entrance signs.
Article 9, yes. Under the current code, monument in the current code is only defined by one picture, and monument in the proposed code is not defined at all. Removing the reference to monument gives us flexibility in the design of the sign. Keep all of their size and material requirements in place. Staff's recommendation is on that is we really don't have a problem with it. We see a lot of subdivision signs that come in and they're on stack block. There's a pole, it goes out, has a shingle sign on it. It's not a monument type sign. So if you do that, you have to get a variance. Now, I don't know where subdivision signs became monument signs, but it's not just in North Augusta. But I think it goes back more to having that island in the middle of the entrance with the, I'm thinking of Hilton Head now, but having the brick sign out there that's has a subdivision's name on it. I think it goes back to that kind of architectural thought. Whereas today, what we see is a lot of, the signs that would otherwise meet the code, except they're just not monument. And I don't understand. I agree with them in that it makes good sense, and that's another bureaucratic hoop that we can cut out for them.
Any issues with that? I think we're okay with that.
Sounds good to me.
In Article 13, protection and increase in buffer width, another issue we've spent some time on. The proposed code now require a 50-foot undeveloped buffer and cannot be subdivided. Current city requirements are 25-foot buffer and DHEC 30-foot buffer up to 45 feet buffer for impaired streams. So there's already more stringent requirements by state law for streams and wetlands and waterways needing additional protection. It's a taking of a property. Implementing this increase in buffer width would be an additional hardship to developing infill projects. Consider keeping regs as they are, or allow the additional 25 feet to be disturbed and replanted as part of the development process and include it in the lot, but place it as a no-build or setback zone. And for staff's comments on that, and these comments, I reached out to our stormwater department. Numerous cities and counties in South Carolina have established riparian or stream buffers that are 50 feet or more, including Aiken County, Richland County, which is 100 feet, Greenville County, Anderson County, up to 100 feet, and Lexington County, to name a few. This was taken into consideration by those communities and found to be proactive, protective, and required. DHEC buffers mentioned by the Home Builders Association are temporary buffers. They are construction buffers considered to be BMPs only protect streams during construction activities. True buffers, such as the current North Augusta City buffer, is a permanent buffer, and the area must remain undisturbed during and after construction, except as are currently allowed by City Council. So to compare the DHEC requirements in the current or proposed buffer would be a mistake. These are two completely different types or uses of the term buffers.
Yeah, 7
Is it
o'clock.
7 o'clock?
Yeah.
Oh, it sure is.
Come back to this
Do you-
this evening.
Do you want to just adjourn this, take a minute, and come back to the regular meeting? We can start from the top and just don't, okay.
All right. Motion to adjourn the study session.
Can we have about a 5-minute break?
Yep. 5-minute break. Thank the audience for being patient while we reset.
Sorry, I guess I'm going too slow.